Welcome back to MidEast in Depth, part of Levant TV's Press Reviews. David Ignatius writes in the Beirut-based Daily Star an article titled "Obama has a chance to reset American leadership." Ignatius says US President Barack Obama certainly didn't go looking for another war in the Middle East. Indeed, he contorted himself almost to the breaking point to avoid one. But as he explained to the country on Wednesday night, Obama had no choice but to respond with, quote, strength and resolve, unquote, to the barbarous ISIS that is ravaging Iraq and Syria. Obama's decision to combat the ISIS offers him a chance to reset American leadership and his own presidency after growing doubt at home and abroad. Stephen Hadley, who was National Security Advisor to President George W. Bush, says Obama's stance as a reluctant warrior will help him reassure foreigners and Americans alike that this isn't a reckless unilateral US crusade. Ignatius believes Obama has taken a pounding over the past year for reticent, risk-averse foreign policy that some characterized as evidence of weakness and retreat. Part of the criticism has been deserved. He should have rejected the polarizing sectarian Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki long ago, and these two mistakes allowed ISIS to feed off Sunni rage in Syria and Iraq so that it became more toxic, and this disaster was not inevitable. A final advantage for Obama is that he seems to understand the historic moment in which the nightmare of ISIS has arisen. The old order in the Middle East is collapsing and the new one hasn't yet emerged. This creates space for religious fanatics who feed on the populist rage of an untethered region. And amid this anarchy, Obama is seeking to prevent the worst outcome without the false hope that he's creating a shining new democratic order. This is still Iraq, but the illusions of 2003 are gone. Matthew Levitt and Lawrey Plotkin-Bocard of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy feature what they call a quick guide to ISIS funding. The Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham ISIS is the world's best funded terrorist group and is richer than some small countries. But how does ISIS, now controlling territory in Syria and Iraq, fill its coffers? The Washington Institute says the group as being independently wealthy, unlike other groups which rely on state sponsors, major donors, or abuse of charity. ISIS is financially independent due to its successful criminal enterprise. The other elements include an illegal inheritance, then known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI. The group brought in some $70 million a year through criminal activities. Private contributions to ISIS are a concern for US policymakers. Wealthy citizens and others in the Persian Gulf countries have funneled hundreds of millions into the conflict. And to generate their money, enterprising criminals of the ISIS use extortion, which levies around $8 million per month in taxes on local businesses, in addition to robberies and the seizure of Mosul's central bank, which netted tens of millions of dollars, let alone counterfeiting, smuggling oil, weapons, and so on. The writers then look at the main funders in the GCC, with Kuwait being the epicenter of fundraising for terrorist groups in Syria. According to the Treasury Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, and contrary to conventional thinking, Saudi Arabia's financial monitoring efforts are effective enough that donors there are encouraged to send money through Kuwait to ensure that it reaches Syria. And now let's talk to MidEast foreign policy commentator David Lawley Wakelin. Welcome to MidEast in Depth.
Good afternoon.
David, what do you think of Obama's speech last Wednesday?
Well, it's very interesting to think that he's now, after a year later, after, Syria, and not saying he was going to bomb there and then he didn't, to come in now and go after ISIS. I think it's crazy, personally. I think that, after 2003, when America and the British bombed the hell out of Western Iraq, killing thousands, just 4,000 alone in Fallujah, the Sunni town where ISIS pretty much sprung from, yes, when there used to be Al-Qaeda in Iraq, to now go back in and say you're going to take them on and hit them in the sovereignty of another country, which is Syria, which you've accepted by the fact that you didn't airstrike them a year before, you've accepted that they have the right to have a civil war there. Mm-hmm. So then if you infringe on that, and let's say, how long will it be before they accidentally hit some of Assad's troops, and does Assad therefore get pulled into the fight and goes against America, or has Obama actually called his bluff, and he wouldn't take on America, and will actually let them get away with striking ISIS in Syria, which is what it's all about, in Raqqa there.
Yes.
So it's an extraordinary situation, because it's a very, very dangerous situation for America, and it's just a war that can only go on and on and on. In fact, by putting airstrikes in, it seems to me they're just pouring more fuel on the fire.
Yes, and why would you say dangerous for America?
Well, dangerous for America because it can only get out of hand. They can't actually take out ISIS. ISIS now control vast swathes of western Iraq and parts of Syria, as we know, with 20 to 30,000 soldiers. They have an infrastructure. They've taken over, the banks, the running of the electricity, the water, and so on. They're trying to build a governing body in those parts, as they say. So they can only keep a war going and extend it, but they can't. And so therefore, if it does get bigger, ISIS will want to strike America and Britain and the West back wherever it can.
Yes, and while President Obama mentioned the word threat or its synonyms 14 times in his rather short speech last Wednesday, why do you think he's still a bit vague on his military strategy in Iraq?
Well, yes, he is. They must. I think they're vague. They don't want to say too much about obviously what they're doing, but they are. They don't want to give too much away. But he's too scared. They don't. There's no way they could ever go in with another invasion and ground forces, because they wouldn't get the support of the American people. The other thing is, of course, they can't really afford to, as a nation, take on another war with their debt at the moment. So he doesn't want to give too much away. But I think all they're going to be able to do is be the air force for the surrounding. For the Kurdish Peshmergas, they can be their air force and so on, but they can't. It's not a war they can win. They cannot wipe out ISIS just by airstrikes, and so it's a foolish thing to do when you haven't got somewhere to go with it.
David Lawley Wakelin, also the author of the documentary The Alternative Iraq Inquiry. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Pleasure, thank you.
And for more updates, please visit our website on levant.tv. You could also subscribe to MidEast in Depth on iTunes. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.